So how do we create neutral colors? How do we mute our colors? Using any combination of the three colors on my palette, my yellow, my cyan blue, and my magenta, I'm going to quiet down or neutralize my color by combining all three. And the best way I've found to have a little bit of fine tuning, a little bit of control as to what neutral color I wind up getting is first to mix a bright secondary color. So I'm going to combine my yellow and my magenta and mix an orange. And then the opposite color on the color wheel to this orange is the blue that is on my palette. I'm going to add just a tiny amount of this blue to this orange, and you'll see that as it stirs into the orange, it changes it from a green to a very neutralized, soft, cool brownish color. So this is the result of fine tuning from orange. Let's say I want this neutral to be a little bit more yellow, have just a little bit more of a yellow undertone. I can add yellow to this mix and alter it. It still contains some amount of all three colors on my palette. If I want to tilt this more into the red territory, I can add my magenta. And you'll see as I paint down this new red next to its bright counterpart that the presence of that little bit of blue still influences it. And the color that I get is softer and just a little bit more naturalistic. I can create a little bit more of a purple cast by increasing blue, increasing magenta, and tilting this neutralized mix in that direction, but you'll see that these magenta and fuchsia colors have a much softer, more naturalistic character. Even if I start to tip things pretty dramatically toward the green, toward the blue, just having that little bit of the color that is not necessary in mixing my green, in this case my magenta, that's going to quiet my green and blue colors down considerably. Anytime I feel a little bit unsure or off course, I can mix more of my initial secondary color, my orange, and play with that and add it back into my blue and green mixtures. The presence of my magenta, my yellow, and my cyan all at once in different proportions, that's going to give me this grayed out cancellation of that brightness. So this neutralization comes again from having the presence of all three of these colors. Any two of them by themselves will make a bright secondary color. In the first strip on our paper, we see those colors: bright oranges, bright purples, bright greens. By adding the missing ingredient to those secondary colors, by adding a yellow to my violet, by adding a blue to my orange, by adding my magenta back into my green, I'm going to wind up with more neutralized, more naturalistic, softer versions of these colors. So you see these in all of these washes that I'm putting down here now. But you might be wondering, well, these colors, they all are pretty, they're soft, but they look a little bit wimpy. These are very watery washes. Well, simply by decreasing the amount of our water in our mix, this is going to intensify these colors significantly. So let's say I want a really dark black or brown, and I don't see that on this palette. We can go dark by just eliminating a large amount of the water that we use in these washes, and we can get some very intense and very rich dark neutral colors. Here, I'm going to mix up a black. So just by increasing the amount of paint pretty dramatically within this mixture, I can mix my blue, my yellow, and my magenta together in order to get black. Now, I find it easiest to mix a really dark purple to start with and then add small amounts of yellow. But you could just as easily mix a dark green and put a little bit of your magenta into it, and you could easily mix a really rich orange and start adding some blue to it. I find that starting with orange and adding blue is actually advantageous if I want to mix a dark brown instead of black. Starting with purple, I find I have an easier time actually seeing that black turn very balanced, very silvery, and very neutral itself, not leaning in any particular direction. This black leans a little purple, so it takes some time and a little bit of fiddling to get a black that really has no specific color cast. I recommend doing this as a practice exercise. It's really going to help you see and mix your color accurately to get a very neutral black or gray that doesn't have any really specific overall color note to it. As I paint this out, it looks a little bit purple wet, but I give it a bit of a chance to dry. I mix it into a little bit of a graduated wash to see how it looks lightened up. Those things are going to help me see this color accurately. And yes, I would say this might have a little bit of an initial purple lean to it, but this is easily fixed with the addition of more yellow if I really want this black to be neutral. For the purposes of a painting, most times I would consider this color close enough. Now let's say I want to make a really rich dark brown. I start mixing magenta and yellow into this neutral color. This gives it a very orange characteristic. And as I manipulate this color, I start to move it into a very dark, rich, reddish brown, something that could be approximated if I were to start adding maybe a burnt umber to my palette. Burnt umber has certain characteristics that would make us want to have it as a palette color that makes it an excellent basic. But as you see from the way that I paint this out, just in terms of getting a dark reddish brown onto your palette, it is not absolutely mandatory to add any paints to your palette beyond these central three: a cyan, a lemon yellow, and a magenta. I hope that this has been interesting and gives you some food for thought. You can easily save a lot of money by focusing on these three mixing colors as your initial watercolor purchase. Student grade paints of a reasonable quality like Van Gogh, like Cotman, like Grumbacher Academy, those are great options. It's fine to approximate these colors with student paints. But rather than getting large elaborate student sets, especially as I look at these and I see the price starting to creep up and up and up, if I were starting all over today, I would probably start by getting professional versions of all three of these colors in large tubes and large quantities. And I would spend a lot of my time learning to mix these colors and learning to control and dial in exactly the type of color that I need in my painting. Now, all of these colors share another common characteristic that we have not covered in this video, but I will cover in a video in addition to this one. All of these colors have a property known as staining. We'll get into what that means, but just keep this at the back of your mind. All of these colors are staining colors. This does make correction a little bit more difficult with these colors. So even in spite of this, I still think that this is a very good place to begin when you're starting to stock up on watercolor and start a new watercolor practice.